What did super uber mega successful Warren Buffett say was the most valuable skill for career success? Communication, especially public speaking. The ability to speak with confidence, to share your ideas, to communicate with ease and with flow is the most important career skill, he says, regardless of whether or not you are pursuing a career as a speaker. So the ability to communicate your ideas is important no matter what you're doing. And as we all know, it's incredibly important for maintaining social relationships as well. So if you follow my channel, you know that I work as a speech coach. And I feel sometimes like I'm almost gatekeeping this huge secret, which is that speech coaching is life-changing. And I don't share that often because I don't want it to sound like, oh, well, she's a speech coach. Of course she thinks that. But I decided, that's really silly because so many people are missing out on something that they may never have heard of, or that they don't realize it can be a profoundly life-changing thing when it comes to increasing your confidence. So I'm making this video today not as a sales plug, but just to share the benefits that can potentially come from speech coaching, what it is, because not everyone has heard of it, and the lesser known benefits to that sort of training. Now, the first thing I want to say is that since doing this for 10 years and helping individuals and groups and corporations with their communication, I have learned that this doesn't come naturally to most people. And clients tell me all the time, like, oh, I see so-and-so on TV and they're just naturally good at it. So-and-so on TV has training. Almost everyone that you see in the media has media training. They are taught how to carry themselves. They are taught how to speak. The trickiest thing about speech is that we're never explicitly taught as children. We learn to speak based on modeling and imitation. It's very natural for humans, so we don't need to be explicitly taught. However, as we go through life, we often pick up bad habits, or we pick up things that we don't necessarily know that we're doing. More on that in a moment. And therefore, we develop a speaking style as a result of the input we had as children, and not necessarily consciously, or how we would wave a magic wand and speak if we had our choice. And so when people are adults and they're in the world of performance or entertainment, they often get training and they get explicitly taught how to do certain things. Now, I will say, if you're a child, or as a child, if you took any sort of theater classes or diction lessons, then yes, you probably had some training in this arena. People who had theater as a child, I have seen, tend to be a lot more confident as adults because they have exposure to being in front of an audience, which is very challenging for most people from a young age. And so as they age, it's not as scary for them. Now, you may have heard public speaking is often cited as humans' number one fear, and it is a form of social anxiety. So when we can overcome the fear of public speaking, we improve our social skills in so many other settings. And to be completely honest, that is why I decided to become a speech coach, because I was socially anxious and awkward, and I was pursuing a degree in speech therapy because I wanted to work with children. And as part of this pursuit, I had an internship with a company that also did speech coaching, which meant public speaking and voice work and accent work. And as part of the internship program, I had to take speech lessons myself, and they terrified me and I hated it at the time, but it taught me so much that when I graduated grad school, I said, you know what? I don't want to work in a traditional setting. I love children. I love working with children, but this has changed my life so profoundly. I want to help people do this. And so that's what I want to talk a little bit about today, is the lesser known ways that speech coaching can really, really change your life. And I'm going to share some tips on how to improve if you can't necessarily invest in private lessons. So the first key benefit of this sort of training, and really any sort of coaching, I will say, but especially with speech and communication, is you don't know what you don't know. And since we're not explicitly taught how to speak or communicate from a young age, we often start doing things out of our conscious awareness. So we may be saying the word like 700 times in a sentence, or actually, or you know, or some other filler that may not be as obvious as or like. We may default to using certain phrases. We may be making facial expressions that we don't realize are conveying something. Our voice may be shaky, or we may be using our voice in a way that's not necessarily reflective of how we feel. And our body language, we may be standing a certain way, we may be using our hands a certain way, we may be fidgeting a certain way that conveys either a sense of insecurity or it's just a bad habit that we've developed over time. So even when we're not feeling nervous or insecure, we start doing the thing, and then other people might misinterpret that. So sometimes we're doing these unconscious behaviors because we feel a certain way. So you may say, oh, when I'm talking to my best friend and I'm super comfortable, I don't do any of that stuff. I'm such a calm, cool, collected speaker. But as soon as you put me in front of a group of people that are slightly intimidating, either in a social setting or a work setting, I get so nervous, and then I start having all of these manifestations of anxiety. So sometimes those manifestations of anxiety are a result of actual anxiety. Other times, we're doing those things just out of habit, and we don't realize that we're doing them all the time. And that's where a coach can be so helpful, because they give you real-time feedback and say, hey, did you notice that after you said the table was brown, you made this face and that made me feel this way, for example? That's what I do with my clients, is they'll say something and I'll ask them, like, were you aware that you used this inflection in your voice? Were you aware that you made this face, or that your gestures conveyed XYZ? And I'll let them know how it made me feel and how it might be interpreted by other people. And with this, they learn things they never would have known, because we don't often give or receive feedback on these sorts of things. People are not going to go out of their way to tell you what you're doing physically that makes them feel a certain way, because most of this is happening so subconsciously. We don't realize that that person speaking so fast is making us nervous. All we think is, oh gosh, I feel really tense whenever that person is around. And it might be that they're engaging in some nonverbal or verbal behavior that's conveying a sense of anxiety that's making you feel stressed. We're constantly influencing one another all the time. And so if you want other people to feel comfortable in your presence, it's so important that you feel comfortable within yourself. And sometimes you may be comfortable, but you might be doing things unconsciously that conveys a sense of discomfort, and that is making other people feel uncomfortable. And then you wonder, why is it so hard for me to make friends? Or why can't I nail the interview? I felt like it went well and they didn't like me for whatever reason. And so much of this is so subjective, and so much of it is so subconscious. And by that, I mean, I had a client just yesterday who said she's interviewing potential new employees at her office. And she said one woman was very well qualified, but she didn't stand when she entered the room. So when the interviewer entered the room, the interviewee did not stand. She had a weak handshake, and she looked too comfortable on the table. And so for those reasons, she said immediately she was disqualified in her mind. And I'm sharing that to say, the interviewee probably has no idea why she wasn't selected for the job, because my client said otherwise the interview went really well. But it's those certain behaviors that convey something that then other people pick up on and will not tell you, because it doesn't always feel appropriate to say, I really don't like the sound of your voice, so therefore I'm not going to hire you. Or unconsciously, it's that person is so annoying. Why are they so annoying? Because the way they speak, the way they show up. But you can't necessarily pinpoint what it is. You're not going to tell them, hey, you're so annoying because you're speaking this way. That's where a coach comes in. And the coach will probably not tell you you sound annoying, but they can tell you, hey, when you do this very specific thing, this is the feedback. Or this is how it comes across to other people. This is how it can potentially make people feel. And so what I love about speech coaching, and when I was being coached myself, what I loved is that you learn things you never knew. I didn't know that I had a very tense sound of voice when I started speech coaching. I didn't know that I was using upspeak, which means ending statements in the form of a question. I didn't know I was doing all of those things until someone gently pointed it out to me and told me how to fix it or told me how to change it, because it's never meant to be a prescription. That's a big misconception about speech coaching, by the way, is that there's one right way to talk and that the coach's job is to teach you how to speak one certain way. That's not it at all. The role of the coach is to bring your awareness to how you are coming across and then working with you to decide how you want to come across and teaching you and helping you understand the behaviors that may be more in alignment with how you actually want to come across. Because not everyone wants to sound the same. And my job would be so boring as a coach if my job was to make everyone sound the same. No, my job is to help you identify how you want to come across and then work with you to experiment and do trial and error. Say, how does this feel? Here's how it came across. Do you like that? Do you want to come across this way? Try this on, try this technique, see how that feels. And then by doing all of these different things, you find what works for you and what feels good and what's sustainable and what gets you positive feedback when you're out in the real world. And when I say positive feedback, I don't mean that people are going to say, oh, I love the way that you said this thing, because they probably won't. It's very subconscious. They may not even notice a change in your speaking style, but they may notice a difference in your energy and your presence and how you're showing up. And people respond, if they respond positively to that, it might not be with words, but energetically you'll sense, oh, this person invited me out again, which normally that doesn't happen. All of these things start to happen once. So things may start to shift and you'll get different nonverbal feedback from other people. Something that I totally forgot about, and then I was looking through a document on my computer, I wrote down that a friend of mine was chatting with some guy online and they talked on the phone, and then she said, nope, I'm not going to go out with him. And I said, why not? And she said, well, he said like way too many times. And I told her, I was like, well, you know, I'm a speech coach. I can help with that. It's very easy to eliminate filler words if you want to. And she said, yeah, I know, but it just indicates a deeper insecurity that I'm not willing to deal with. Take that however you want, but it shows that she interpreted his overuse of the word like as a deep insecurity. Whether or not that's true, we don't know. We haven't met the guy. I haven't met the guy. I have no idea. But it's something like that he probably has no idea, because I don't think she told him, hey, you say like too much. And so and it's not her responsibility to tell him that per se. That's where coaching can be so helpful, because it is literally the speech coach's job to say, hey, when you say like 5 times in one sentence, it may come across as insecure, for example. So another benefit from speech coaching is it improves your own sense of control because you start to become aware of your own patterns and your own habits. Now you're self-conscious, but in a good way. So it's not self-conscious of like, oh gosh, I'm doing everything wrong. It's conscious and aware of yourself, saying, oh, in this environment, I would like to come across a little calmer. What can I do to practice that if I don't feel calm? For example, you don't have to feel a certain way to come across a certain way. That's the beauty of coaching too. That's a secret. That's a best kept secret, is that with coaching, with speech coaching in particular, at least the way I teach it, yes, we address the feelings. We want you to feel calm. We want you to feel comfortable and in control and confident. And if you don't feel that way, you can still engage in behaviors that suggest that you are confident and calm and cool and collected. And by doing that, you will start to improve your feelings of confidence. And so you feed into a positive feedback loop. And then you come across as more confident. So people perceive you as more confident. So then you get the feedback that you're more confident, and then you start to build yourself up. So being aware of your own patterns can help you be more in control. And I don't mean control in a very rigid way, but just control the way that you'd be in control of your body if you're doing a yoga class. You're aware of your movements in space. Or a dance class. You have to be aware of your movements in space in order to make certain movements, in order for things to flow. And so when that happens with our speaking and with our body language and our facial expressions and the tone of our voice and all of that, it's not about trying to manipulate and manufacture how we're coming across in every situation. It's saying, oh, let me do what works for me in this situation. Maybe you want to be super high energy and you're giving a pep talk and you're trying to make someone feel better. So then you'll know what techniques, how to use your voice, the rate of speech, the pitch, the tone, all of that fun stuff to convey that energy. And these are things that you get to experiment with and turn on and off when you want to. But really you want the default to be whatever is most aligned with your most authentic personality, which is going to change based on how you feel. Then you get to decide, do I want to come across how I feel if I'm feeling nervous, or do I want to come across in a way that's going to better reflect my message, even if I'm feeling a little nervous? So it's not about ignoring your feelings or overriding your feelings. It's about prioritizing the needs of the audience and the needs of your greater message. So saying, yes, I feel nervous right now, and me showing up as being super nervous right now isn't in anyone's best interest. So it's not me ignoring my nerves, it's learning to manage and handle and address my nerves and treat myself with care and still show up the way that is aligned with how I want to come across in that situation, which usually isn't nervous for most people. And the last thing I'll mention today, I could go on for days because literally coaching has changed my life and I'm so lucky to get to help people with this. But the last thing I'll mention is perhaps particular to the work that I do and that I was trained to do, which has to do with the sound of the speaking voice itself. One of the things I was told when I was an intern was that my voice was really tense, that it was shaky, and that it conveyed a certain level of insecurity that I didn't really feel, and I was confused by that. But then when I learned to get to know my voice, my speaking voice, which I always thought was something that couldn't be changed. I never thought much about my voice. I was like, this is how I sound, whatever. But then when I learned more about it, and I started using my voice differently, and I learned how to make it more relaxed. I learned how to project in a healthy way instead of shouting in a way that was uncomfortable. When I learned all of these things, I started to feel differently. I started to feel more confident because I learned how to trust my voice. One habit that I always had growing up, especially as a teenager, is anytime I would talk to an adult, my voice would get really high. I'd talk to my friend and be like, hey, Kelsey, and then I'd talk to her mom and I'd be like, hi, Miss Pillars. And she always teased me for it. Kelsey teased me for it. And she's like, why does your voice go up in pitch whenever you talk to my mom? And that was something I didn't know how to work with. And then once I learned how to actually control the sound of my speaking voice, that stopped happening. And so I realized even if I'm nervous, I have control of the sound of my voice. And so I'd start speaking and be like, oh, wait, I sound confident right now. My voice sounds strong right now. It doesn't sound shaky. I must be confident. And so my internal sense of anxiety and my jitters would start to subside because I'd be hearing a voice that sounded strong, that sounded powerful, or however I wanted it to sound in that moment. And so once I learned to trust the literal physical sound of my speaking voice and my ability to use my speaking voice, my feeling of confidence in general in any situation skyrocketed. And so that's why I became so passionate about it, because I noticed myself showing up at parties, making friends easier, socializing better, and then professionally it did wonders. And obviously, as a speech coach, I had to be very aware of how I was speaking and still do. So, if you're curious about getting this sort of coaching for yourself, it can be a hefty investment sometimes, but I will say we make the most changes when we invest in something. Anytime I've given someone a free session, they like it, they enjoy it, they get something from it, but it's not as like, whoa, motivating to change and to work on things because you're not investing something in it. So if you are interested, you can go to my website, powerfulandpoised.com, and there is a section called coaching, and you can download the coaching packages document that explains how it all works. And of course, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me at hello@powerfulandpoised.com. I'm also going to share some tips that you can do if you cannot invest in speech coaching. But before I do that, another alternative is that last year I compiled all of my 10 years of coaching experience into a self-paced online course that I tried to make very budget friendly. It is available for $27.99 on Udemy with a 30-day money-back guarantee, and that is called Show Up Sure: Secrets to Embody Confidence for a Lifetime. And so far the reviews have said that it goes beyond building your confidence, and it has helped people very much overcome their social anxiety and their fears around speaking. So if you're interested in checking that out, the link for that is in the video description. Now, if you say, like, I absolutely cannot invest in this at all, then the starting place is to get curious about how you are coming across and what your speaking style is and what you want your speaking style to be in different situations, because it's going to change, and it should change in different situations. So the best way to get feedback on this, if you don't have a coach or you're not doing a guided program, is to film yourself. Film yourself and watch it back. People say to me, like, oh, well, do you think all these influencers have training? They probably don't. I mean, some of them definitely do. I know because I work with them. But a lot of people on the internet probably don't have formal training, but they are constantly recording themselves and looking back at it. So remember that there's work that goes into it. This doesn't come naturally for most people. So record yourself and be very compassionate, self-compassionate when you watch it back, because you won't have the safety of an objective lens. So if a coach is giving you feedback, they're doing so from a very objective place. They're on the outside watching you. When you're watching yourself, it's harder to be on the outside because obviously it's you. And so you have internal feelings and judgments about yourself. So I encourage you to do this with so much self-compassion. And you can subscribe to my newsletter where I do share some tips and strategies and other techniques to improve your speaking confidence, even if you don't do formal coaching or take the online course. And I am putting together a virtual group class coming soon, but I want to gauge interest in that, and that's a more affordable option. And also, you get to practice in front of other people. But I highly recommend individual coaching, whether it's with me or anyone else, because it is life-changing. I've never had a client say they regretted doing it, and for me, it changed the whole trajectory of my life. I wouldn't be speaking on YouTube if I didn't have the confidence to do that. And remember, Warren Buffett said investing in communication and especially public speaking is the most essential skill, or it's the most valuable skill for career success. And I think relationship success. The reason I do this is not to help people feel better in their corporate presentations, even though that's what a lot of them come to me for. My passion is in helping people feel more comfortable in their relationships and in their personal lives, because to me that's more important. Our relationships are the most important thing that we have. But if you can get good at public speaking, you can get good at having difficult conversations or going on dates or socializing or whatever it is. You'll get better at those things, because public speaking is like so terrifying that everything else is going to feel easy by comparison. So leave a comment and let me know what questions you have. Have you heard about speech coaching? What does that mean to you? Have you heard about voice coaching? What does that mean to you? Let me know if you have any questions, and thank you so much for watching. And again, you can find me at powerfulandpoised.com.